What's going on, guys? Arekkz here, welcome back to another Monster Hunter World video and the next episode in my weapon workshop tutorial series. This is the series where I go over absolutely everything you could possibly want to know about a given weapon, right from the basic moves available to you all the way up to the main most efficient combos you should be using and some overarching weapon theory. If you guys missed last week's episode, then I went over how to use the gun lance, and over the course of the next few weeks I'll be putting together guides to cover each of the 14 weapons in Monster Hunter World, and today we're continuing that by turning our attention to the Switch Axe. The Switch Axe is a powerful melee weapon that uses momentum to switch between its two modes, Axe and Sword. Axe mode offers great mobility and high-reaching attacks, meanwhile Sword mode offers great damage and allows hunters to dip into the inbuilt files for additional damage, be that raw, elemental or status. At first glance, it might seem a little technical, but in truth, the Switch Axe is a relatively simple weapon once you understand how the two modes work together. It's also one of the more stylish weapons when used correctly. Watching someone flow from Axe mode into Sword mode to dish out incredible damage and then seamlessly flow back into Axe mode really is a sight to behold. So if you're looking for something powerful and a little different, then Switch Axe might just be what you're looking for. Now, before we dive in and go over the core moves of the weapon, there's a couple of things you need to understand first. To begin with, the Switch Axe is both Axe and Sword. Whilst in Axe mode, you're more mobile and can move around more freely, meanwhile in Sword mode, it's much more akin to walking around with a greatsword, but the trade-off for your lack of mobility is the damage that you deal. Additionally, your attacks in Sword mode have natural mind's eye, so they're great for attacking monsters in locations that would ordinarily see other weapon attacks bounce. Whilst both Axe and Sword modes are important, you'll be dealing most of your damage in Sword mode and then switching to Axe mode for mobility and to manage your meter. So the Switch Axe has a gauge at the top of the screen. The meter in the middle, the little thin bar, is your file meter. In order to attack in Sword mode, you need to have meter, and any attack you do uses this up. When it's empty, you'll be returned to Axe mode, at which point the meter then begins to regenerate automatically. If you're below the little white line, the 33% mark, then attempting to switch to Sword mode will force you to perform a manual reload. This is something you want to avoid doing at all costs, so good use of this weapon will require good meter management. After all, it's called a Switch Axe, and the switch portion of this weapon is key to good gameplay. Dipping into Sword mode to dish out the damage, and then seamlessly switching back into Axe mode when the meter runs low allows you to keep your combos going and manage your meter without being forced to reload. However, new to Monster Hunter World is an additional state, the Amped state. You'll notice that your attacks in Sword mode fill the meter on the outside. Once this maxes out, you enter the Amped state, your sword attacks gain a small damage boost, and you also gain a second file hit too. So this is ideally something you want to aim to maintain as much as possible during a hunt. And speaking of file hits, Switch Axes also have files. When crafting your Switch Axes, you'll see different file types. These range from Power, Power Element, Dragon, Paralysis, and Exhaust. When attacking in Sword mode, you can dish out some additional damage that corresponds to these files. Power files are simply more raw damage, good for attack-focused builds. Power Element files boost the elemental power of the Switch Axe. Dragon files add an additional fixed amount of dragon damage to your sword attacks, typically found on Switch Axes that don't have natural dragon element. Paralysis files allow your sword attacks to inflict this status, and typically these Switch Axes will also carry an additional hidden paralysis element on top that'll need to be awakened. And then finally you have the exhaust files, allowing your sword attacks to drain monster stamina, plus exhaust damage dealt to the head of a monster counts as KO damage, so it can KO monsters too. But all of these file attacks are only present when attacking in Sword mode, meanwhile the natural element of the weapon is present in Axe mode too. Now I appreciate I covered a fair bit there and likely listed a few terms that might not mean much just yet, so now let's turn our attention to the moves to see what this thing can do. Since there are two forms to the Switch Axe, we're going to start with the Axe mode since this is technically speaking the default mode. Pressing triangle 3 times consecutively will perform your bog standard looping combo, side slash, rising slash, overhead slash, with the final hit, that overhead slash, being the strongest hit in the combo. There are a couple other ways to get to the overhead slash too, but we'll cover those shortly. While this might not be your biggest damage combo, it is high reaching, so you can use this to hit tails, wings, or other hard to reach areas on the monsters. Pressing forward and triangle or circle will perform the forward slash. You can then follow this up with 3 triangle inputs to go into your regular triangle combo. This is a good way to open since the attack moves you forward, covers decent ground, and flows quite nicely into a number of different moves. You can also press circle following a roll to go into the forward slash too, so if you roll to cover ground, then you can go into this attack and actually move a fair distance. Moving on from there, if you press circle repeatedly, you'll begin the wild swing combo. This is an infinite combo that also drains your stamina. It's typically not something you'll use for extended periods of time, and by that I mean you won't just sit here spamming this combo indefinitely, but it is incredibly important because it links into some of your strongest attacks, but we'll touch more on that when we move over to the sword mode. Pressing triangle during this attack will see you go into the overhead slash from the end of the triangle combo. Pressing triangle and circle together will go into the rising slash, and pressing triangle once more following this will again go into the overhead slash. This is a decent high reaching combo, again good for hitting areas like tails. Following any attack in axe mode, you can pull back and press circle to perform the fade slash. This moves you back a little bit, so it can be used to reposition or evade slightly. And if you work a triangle attack into the end of this, you can loop this indefinitely. Not really something you'll be doing, but it can be done. Now you can evade roll out of most attacks, but if you input either left or right and X following an attack in either sword or axe mode, you can sidestep. This is incredibly useful. It's something you will use a lot for evasive movements and also to reposition, and again, this can be done in both axe and sword mode. Then finally, pressing R2 will morph. If you're in axe mode, it'll morph you into sword mode, and if you're in sword mode, it'll morph you back into axe mode. Remember that if you want to go into sword mode, you'll need to be above the white line in the meter at the top. If you're not, then you'll trigger the manual reload animation, which is slow, and you really want to avoid this at all costs. Additionally, morphing while standing still is not something you want to be doing. It's slow and leaves you open. What you want to do is morph mid-combo. Following any attack in axe mode, you can press R2 to initiate a morph slash. This is not only an attack, but it's also a much more fluid transition. This also works the other way too, allowing you to go back into axe mode when necessary. Additionally, when your weapon is sheathed, if you want to draw directly into sword mode, pressing R2 will allow you to do so. Now returning for a moment to speak about the wild swing combo, I mentioned that it was important because it leads into one of your strongest hits. If you press R2 during the wild swing, you'll go into the morph sweep. This morphs you into axe mode whilst attacking and moves you forward some distance, and more importantly, the penultimate hit of the axe attack is actually one of your strongest single hit attacks with this weapon, and while it's not something you will be using all the time, it's an important thing to keep in mind. If you're playing solo and you want to wake up a sleeping monster, you always want to do so with your strongest possible attack, since the first hit is doubled. So in the case of the switch axe, landing this hit is what will see you do the most damage in one attack. Outside of that, however, this is also just going to be a nice way to go from axe into sword mid-combat, since it does good damage and then allows you to continue attacking in sword mode. Finally, you can also press R2 whilst rolling to morph into sword 2, so there really are plenty of ways to go from axe into sword. So now that we're in sword mode, let's cover these moves, since this is where a large portion of your damage is going to come from. Also remember that sword attacks have a natural mind's eye, so your attacks won't bounce. Pressing triangle 3 times consecutively performs your basic combo. Overhead slash, right rising slash, left rising slash. This can be looped, but keep in mind that you can only do this while you have meter in your file gauge. Pressing circle twice will perform the double slash into Heavenward Flurry. Now it's worth noting that Heavenward Flurry is a great move for charging your amped state that I mentioned earlier. That attack pushes up the charge by a considerable amount, more so than any other move, but it's not really a move you'll be using much when it's time to do damage. It's slow and leaves you a little bit open, so this is something you will use to charge, but once you're in the amped state, there are better moves you can be using. So when charging your meter, your standard combo will be triangle, circle, circle, repeat. This is your combo for building up to the amped state. 1.5 of these combos and you should be there, meaning you'll be able to evade or sidestep out before the second Heavenward Flurry. And once you're charged, you can then switch to focus on damage. For damage, triangle, 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 circle, repeat will be your combo. It takes the entire triangle combo, works the double slash from the circle into the end, and then loops back around, skipping the slower Heavenward Flurry. But do note that this combo is slower at building meter, hence why we use the first one to go into the amped state, and this one for damage. Now at any point during a sword combo, you can press R2 to morph back into axe mode. I mentioned that you need to have meter to remain in sword mode, and the last thing you want to do is run out completely, because in doing so, you're forced into this manual transition which is slow and leaves you vulnerable. Pressing R2 to morph back in combo is not only more fluid, but you also regain 16% of your file gauge in the process. Notice how when I swap, my meter jumps up a little bit. This is what happens when I morph mid-combo. So you want to keep an eye on your meter in combat, and when you see it getting low, morph back. If you're mid-combo, your combo will always finish first, but ensure that you're pressing R2 to trigger the morph yourself so as to avoid being left open. Alternatively, following a sword attack, you can pull back and press R2 to perform the downward fade slash. This again morphs you back into axe mode, granting you 16% meter in the process, but it also moves you backwards, so it can be used as an evasive move at the same time. Also, rolling and pressing R2, much like in axe mode, allows you to switch from sword into axe, and again you get a decent degree of movement with this, so it's another useful evasive option. Now finally, the last move for the switch axe. Whilst in sword mode, pressing triangle and circle together will initiate the elemental discharge, and if you then spam triangle following this, you'll perform this attack. It's got a short build up, and then it explodes. This consumes a good portion of your meter, and will see you return to axe mode once it's done. Now if you initiate this, and decide you want to cancel it, you can simply stop spamming triangle, and you'll remain in sword mode, or you can pull back and press triangle to let the explosion out earlier. This does less damage than a fully charged one, but it does allow you to finish sooner, and once again, returns you to axe mode. Furthermore, if you are in the amped state and your blade is glowing, then if this attack connects with the monster, you'll latch onto the side, jam your sword into them and unleash the explosion. This is more powerful, but can also be a little bit more risky since the monster can take you with them if they decide to move. But again, it does good damage. Additionally, the first 3 hits trigger file hits, so it's great for applying file damage based on the type that you have. Also, you can go to this move more fluidly following these circle attacks, either circle into triangle plus circle to go from the double slash into the element discharge. This skips the slower starting animation, so allows you to go in mid combo, and similarly you can get into it following the heavenward flurry as well. So if you see your amp gauge max out mid combo, know that you can transition into this right away. Now, those are all your core moves, but let's very quickly go over aerial and sliding moves, and then we'll speak about combos. While sliding down a hill, pressing triangle goes into the jumping sweep in axe mode, and from there you can then continue into your regular attacks. Meanwhile, pressing R2 while sliding goes into the jumping rising slash in sword mode, again allowing you to follow up into your combos when you land. Also, you can go straight into the element discharge, should you wish. Jumping off a ledge and pressing triangle goes into the jumping slash in axe, and jumping off a ledge and pressing R2 goes into the jumping slash in sword. And the same also applies for runnable surfaces. Sadly, no fancy moves this time, so simply triangle for another jumping slash in axe, or R2 for a jumping slash in sword. Now, with all the moves covered, how do we tie it all together? What combos should you be using to do the most damage? Well, first up, as mentioned earlier, your basic amped meter building combo is triangle, circle, circle. This should be used for the sole purpose of getting into the amped state. Assuming the opening is there, it should take you around 1.5 of these combos to get amped, but from that point, you then move to damage. When your sword is in the amped state, your damage combo is triangle, 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 circle, repeat. This removes Heavenward Flurry from the equation and gives you a strong combo that can be looped all whilst you have meter, and since you're in the amped state, you're getting the bonus file attack with each hit. Of course, you can also work the element discharge into the end of this, but I typically do this when you know you're coming to the end of your combo. Say the monster is down, you loop the basic damage combo a couple of times, then when you see it getting up, round it out with an element discharge. Since you're in the amped state, you'll latch onto the monster, and provided it doesn't roar or do something to make you flinch, then you should be able to round it out with some good damage. Note that for the purpose of demonstration, you can't latch onto the training pillar, hence why it's a regular element discharge. Also, keep in mind that anytime you see your meter getting low, remain in control and press R2 to morph back. It's easy to get carried away in the combo, but if you're forced to switch back when you're out of meter, then you're left open and it's just a bad place to be. And of course, when you're in axe mode, a good move is to go from the forward slash into the wild swing, and then when you have meter, you can press R2 to go back into sword mode. Since this combo has that strong hit in it, it then means that you're doing some nice damage during the morph, and you can then dip into your standard damage combo. Now, what about armor skills? If you've got to this point and you're like, yeah, switch axe is awesome, I'm gonna go and make me one of those right now, then here are some useful skills you might want to consider. As always, your typical selection of attack and damage focused skills apply here. Anything like attack boost, weakness exploit, critical boost, critical eye, agitator, etc. Any of those will have value, and since switch axe is such a powerhouse weapon, stacking various damage focused skills is usually a given. However, outside of that, Power Prolonger is a useful skill since it extends the duration of the amped state, so if you want to focus more on damage and less on rebuilding that state, then this could prove useful. In addition to that, Focus speeds up the rate at which your file gauge refills, so if you want to minimize your downtime between your big combos, again you might want to consider this. I will however say that I don't really feel this is that necessary. If you're frequently switching back using the Morph Slash, which grants you 16% of your file gauge in the process, then it's very easy to remain topped up in combat. You also have Evade Extender. I really like this, but again it's a personal choice and completely optional. Since the switch axe has the ability to sidestep as well as dodge, then Evade Extender gives you more distance on your side hops, which is great for evading incoming attacks and also repositioning to ensure you're attacking the best point. Handicraft is another good option given the natural mind's eye offered by the sword mode. While you're free to cut through anything, your sharpness does take a hit as a result. So having extended sharpness in your bracket is handy, and in select situations being able to push into white sharpness offers a little bit extra on top. And to pair that up, you have Protective Polish. This is the skill from the Odogaron armor, but is also a decoration too. This prevents your sharpness from depleting for 60 seconds after sharpening, so if you have white sharpness, this is a great option. Now of course there are plenty of other options too, depending on the type of build you're going for. If you have status files, you might dip into skills that boost those, or elemental skills to bolster that aspect of your weapon, but as a starting block, those are some good options to consider. Now finally, to round out the video, another new addition this week, but I thought it might be helpful to see some more extended gameplay at the end of these tutorials to give you a clearer picture as to how this all ties together. It's one thing knowing the moves and the combos you should be using, but it's another thing when you're out in the field. So I'm going to very quickly cut together a few combat segments from a hunt and just give you guys a quick rundown on what's going on. For this one, we're going to be fighting a high rank pink Rathian in the arena. The first thing I'm going to do is jump off here and draw straight into sword to get the mount. It's an easy way to start the fight in this instance, and more importantly, as you'll see in just a moment, when I pull off the mounting finisher, since it's a mounted element discharge, it also charges my amped meter quite considerably. As such, when jumping off, I can then run up, draw into sword mode again with R2, and begin my combo. Now, were I building amped meter from 0, I'd use the typical triangle circle circle combo, but since I'm so close to max thanks to the mount, I can afford to drop the Heavenward Flurry and just begin the DPS combo. Knowing that the Rathian is going to get up and roar after this, I'll end it with an element discharge so that I can get off some more damage, and use the explosion to push me further out. So admittedly in this instance the cat helped out a bit here. I was a tiny bit late on the element discharge, so had that interrupt not happened, the roar likely would have knocked me off, but in this instance, it worked out. Following that, typical Rathian strategy, if she goes up for a tail flip, flash her out the sky, and since I'm in the amped state already, I can dive back into the DPS combo on the head. Keep in mind though, following on from my previous combo, I'm running low on meter, so I'm going to make sure to round out this combo with a morph to give me some more meter back in return. Next up, admittedly, I'm a little bit far out here, but I'm buying myself some time for my meter to refill, so using the wild swing so I can morph sweep into the sword mode. It travels a good distance, so I'm able to clip Rathian's legs here, and shortly after, get the trip. Again, giving me a nice opening for damage. Jumping forward a little bit for this next bit, you'll see that following a down, I'm going in for a limited combo. I'm mindful that my meter is low, so I don't want to go too far and trigger that manual reload. So to round it out, I instead go into the element discharge. This will allow me to round out in Axe mode, and then I can run around for a few seconds till the meter passes that 33% mark. Moving forward again, admittedly here I could have just flashed her out the sky, but instead I draw into Axe and begin the wild swing combo with the intention of going into morph sweep and hopefully knocking her out the sky. Obviously there are parts of Rathian's body that are hard, so the bounce stopped me from doing that, but now that she's down, I can repeat that combo, go into the sword attack, whilst also taking advantage of that high damage hit from the morph sweep. And finally, to round it out, my cat put Rathian to sleep, so this is a good opportunity to demonstrate the wake up move. Positioning isn't ideal here, it's a bit cramped, but begin the wide sweep a little distance away so you don't hit the monster, then press R2 to morph, and the strong hit should then be the wake up, and in this instance, the kill shot. So, there you have it, a new addition to the weapon workshops, but hopefully seeing a little bit more extended gameplay gives you guys a better idea as to how you might play the weapon. But that, my friends, is pretty much it for this week's tutorial. That's everything you need to know about the Switch Axe. Hopefully you found it helpful, and hopefully it's encouraged you to go and try out this weapon for yourself. If you enjoyed the video, then a like would be super appreciated. Be sure to comment down below if you have any questions, but otherwise keep it locked as there'll be a new weapon workshop next Sunday. But until then, thanks very much for watching, take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.